You are on the American Sci-Fi Classics track. And that's so sweet. And my name is Joe. I'm one of the track director guys, and we're here to talk about. Well, has anybody seen 2001: Space Odyssey? Well, here's one thing that I wanted to do before we get started. I think a fun thing to do to bring up our amazing guests would be for you guys to sing or hum the 2001 Space Odyssey theme. So, I will tell you guys when to go. And here we go. That's good. But hold on just a second. Am I the only one that wanted the nature boy Ric Flair to come out? Maybe next year. But right now, let's do that one more time. That was just a practice. You guys are amazing. We're going to do that one more time, starting now. Ladies and gentlemen, Keir, Dullea, Gary Lockwood.
Can you hear? Can you hear us? Great.
Do you mind if I have some water?
Go right ahead, my friend. I got to tell you, that's a first for us. We do a few shows like this, but that's amazing. I don't think I could do. I don't think I could do that. That's great.
They did that for me in Japan, and it was with an accent. I'm also a natural-born liar, so.
But thank you guys both for coming.
A pleasure.
We are going to get to some questions from you guys. I'm sure you've got tons of things, but to start with, you guys are here on the Walk of Fame for photos and that kind of thing. You're there somewhere.
We're on the Walk of Fame for photos and autographs, yeah.
Terrific. And you've got amazing, I was just backstage with these guys for 3 minutes, and there's 20 stories that I got in the middle of. And trying to think of one to start you guys off with. In addition to 2001: Space Odyssey, if you don't mind telling this again. I know you just told it a second ago.
Which one, about the Star Trek guy?
Let's start with that.
Okay, as some of you may know, I did the pilot for Star Trek. And if you're a real Star Trek fan, you'll say, no, you made the second pilot. And then I will counter, it's like a poker match, and then I will say, yeah, but the other one didn't sell it. So anyway, this is a fast thing. Trekkies can be pretty funny, and if you're really a dyed-in-the-wool Trekkie, don't be offended by this, but I was doing the Trek show, and some Trekkie, some of them are pretty out there, and one of them came up and he went like this. He looked down at my table, and we have our pictures, 2001, and I'd made some movies with Elvis and some Henry Fonda. I have various pictures on my table, and a guy goes, is that you? I said, yeah. Pilot for Star Trek? It is, yeah. if I buy one, could you put something on there? Could you write something for me? I said, sure, yeah, whatever you like. You just tell me and I'll write it. Well, I'd like something that happened between you and Kirk in the Academy. Understand something. I'm not a Trekkie. I do like sci-fi, but I'm not a Trekkie type. So, but the point is, I didn't know what he meant, see? So I said, I look at him and I go, the Academy? He said, yeah, the Academy. Something had happened. Are you talking about the aspect ratio of the TV Academy as opposed to the 5.35 to 1, which we shot 2001 with 70 mil? And as I said that, I could see it was wrong. He's looking at me like this. No, it's not. I don't know what you're talking about. I said, oh, okay, well then tell me, what is it? And he said, something that happened to you and Kirk when you were in the Academy together. And some other person said, he means the Starship Academy. And I said, oh. So all the people in Star Trek were in the Starship Academy. Said, that's right, that's where they got their training. And I said, oh, well, I don't want to be the great iconoclast in your life, but there is no Starship Academy. I'm not exaggerating. His entire demeanor just went. And it was really kind of sad. And he said, there wasn't any Starship Academy? I said, it's funny to talk about now, but I remember looking at him and he goes, there wasn't any Starship Academy? And I said, no. I said, Gene Roddenberry, I worked with him for a whole year on a thing I did called The Lieutenant. He created Starship and Star Trek, you know. The Academy was all just, make-believe. Like, movies. It's movies, man. Anyway, that's enough of me. That's it. By the way, that first line to you about "Can I have some water, Johnny?" That shows you how old I am. I was thinking Jack Parr, Johnny Carson.
I got a couple of favorite stories, two, about Space Odyssey. The first one was the voice of Hal. Stanley had originally was thinking, do any of you remember the actor Marty Balsam? Well, he was thinking of Marty Balsam, then he said, no, it's too New York. So then he hired a wonderful British actor, because the whole film was filmed in England, by the name of Nigel Davenport. So he was on the set with us doing the off-camera lines of Hal. Terribly British, so, oh no, it's all like this, you know. And Stanley said, no, that's wrong, not British. He said, I'll worry about it in post-production. So meantime, he turned to his first assistant director, Nigel Cracknell? What was it?
Derek
Cracknell.
What a name for an AD.
So he said, Derek, you do the voice for the boys for the rest of the film. Because he didn't cast that part till well after the shooting was done. So this was the voice of Hal for both of us for the rest of the film. Dive. Oh no, I can't do it. Daisy, give me your answer true. So it was like a little bit like doing it with a drunken, who's the English actor that always said?
You mean a drunken Cockney, right? Like
yeah, no. One of those guys, right? That was the line. Anyway, the other story is there was going to be a scene. There wasn't a lot of dialogue in this film, as you know, but there was one scene where I was going to have to converse with Mission Control, and it was technological gobbledygook from my point of view, very difficult to memorize. So I was working on for weeks and weeks, anticipating this kind of technically difficult scene, and I had it really down, and I shot it. Well, in the editing room, Stanley decided the scene was redundant, that there was another scene with Mission Control talking to us that was too similar, and he didn't need it. However, because of the way I memorized it, it'll go to my grave, and this is how it went. This is 1966. Mission Control, this is X-Ray Delta 1. At 1920 onboard fault prediction center on a 90000 computer showed Alpha Echo 35 unit is possible failure within 48 hours. Request check your in-ship system simulator. Also confirm your approval our plan to go EVA and replace Alpha Echo 35 unit prior to failure. Mission Control, this is X-Ray Delta 1, transmission concluded. And that's it. I still know it. I'm showing off a little bit.
Hey, I never did ask you, but did you get extra money for that?
Only residuals.
So tell me about how you guys got started.
Somebody up there doesn't want to hear the answer to that, I guess.
Dropping the mic in the first panel. But tell me, so you guys both, like just the genesis of your involvement in 2001. They contacted you, they gave you this crazy script. Then what happened?
Well, actually, how I heard about it was kind of amazing. I was doing a film in London about 6 or 7 months before. It was a film with Laurence Olivier and Carol Lindley called Bunny Lake is Missing. And I had the day off, and I went down to, they had a fun fair in the area called Battersea, which is right on the Thames River. It doesn't exist anymore. It was actually a small carnival, and there was a fortune teller's tent. He read palms. I'd never had that done, so I thought just for a lark I'd go in, and he read my palm, and he started asking me questions like, are you a mathematician? I said no. Well, are you a professor? Do you work in the sciences in some way? I said no. He said, well, are you well, and he asked me more questions like that. He says, and then I said, he said to me, well, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, sir, but I see a rocket ship in your palm. Now, I didn't know a thing about 2001, never heard of it. Well, actually, that's another story too. So a few weeks later, I come home and my wife says, call your agent. And I called my agent in Los Angeles, and he says, are you sitting down? I said, why? You've just been offered the lead in Stanley Kubrick's next film. That's exactly how it happened. Obviously, he had screened some of my films before that, but I did not know I was being considered. It was out of the blue. And it was an amazing moment in my life because I was a Stanley Kubrick fan from way back from when I had seen Paths of Glory, which I think is one of his great films of all time. And I had been a science fiction fan, not in those days, but when I was 12, 13, or 14, I used to subscribe to all the science fiction magazines like Astounding Science Fiction or I can't remember the names of them all, but I subscribed to about 3 different magazines, and my mother would give me a volume of the best science fiction of 1951, 1952. It came out. There was a volume that came out every year, and they reprinted some of the best stories from those magazines. And when I was reading the script, which came to me shortly after I got the offer, I said, something is terribly familiar. Why do I sort of know? And it was a short story called The Sentinel that Stanley bought the rights for, and that was the germ that became 2001, and I had read that at the age of 13. Yeah.
Anyway. Well, not unlike Keir, we didn't audition for 2001, and I got a call from my agency, and he said, Stanley Kubrick wants you to, star in this new movie. And my first reaction to my agent was, fantastic. What's it gonna cost me? That's a true story. Anyway, one fast aside here. After we made the movie, and eventually I went on the continent and worked in some other movies. But eventually I got back, and it took a long time for them to cut. And so a couple years after we left London, the picture came out. And while I was traveling cross country to sell it, Keir and I went in different cities because Look magazine had come out with 10 pages, and it was a big deal. 10 pages on one movie in Look magazine, that's a pretty big deal. So we were both moving around the country doing PRs, on these your morning movie show and things like that. And I got into Denver, Colorado, and to be candid, it was the year of Cary Grant and Gary and Doris Day. It wasn't exactly sci-fi time, and everywhere we left, we got sort of bad press. And I got into Houston, Texas, and I called. Stanley Kubrick was now in London, and I called Kubrick. And I said, Stanley, they're not getting the picture to the people who are going to be watching. And I said, we're doing all these shows, but I don't think it's our audience. And so he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I've thought of a strategy. And so what I did, when we got to Houston, I invited everybody from all the press, the underground press, the college press, everything. And it was a tactic that seemed to work. And I told them that I was sick from being on the road, that I had stomach problems and was getting the flu, and and I'd had asthma and every other thing. And I said, so I can't really spend much time. If you'll all come together, we'll have a big, nice breakfast, and we'll have a lot of nice food and croissants and scrambled eggs, and then you can all talk to me at one time. And so they all came, and it was fantastic because the ones from the college press and the different sci-fi organizations all had all the questions, and they'd say, well, how do you show orbital velocity or escape velocity, or how do you show all these different things? And I said, well, we do this and this and this and this. And the normal press, the people who really are the juggernaut, of the Houston Gazette or whatever, didn't have anything to say. They all wanted me to be Cary Grant. Anyway, and then when they left, I said to the MGM rep, I said, David, tell the person I feel a lot better this afternoon. And then they would come back, and that we kind of got our point across. But when we came out, we did not get good press. We didn't get good press in Washington. We didn't get very good press in New York. We got so-so press in LA, and within about 2 weeks, you couldn't get in the theater. And it was truly, it was one of those generational things that changed everything in the movie business.
It was interesting, as Gary said, the reviews were very mixed. I mean, it's become an iconic film how many years later? But at that time, it got some wonderful reviews, but 50% were really terrible reviews, and people walked out of the premiere showings of the film. Anyway, MGM kind of cottoned on to the fact that a lot of young people were smoking funny cigarettes. And they changed, they knew, like 4 months into the distribution, they had this new poster come out. And in big banners across the poster, it said, 2001, the ultimate trip.
Sure. I'd like to add an addendum to that. The Beatles were getting famous around that time, and I met them once in New York at the Plaza Hotel, and I spoke. I take it you didn't like them, huh? Of course. Jim Morrison, Elvis Presley, and the Beatles. Bob Dylan. I smoked pot with all those guys.
Turned me on for the first time.
Hey, I went to UCLA. I'm a California surfer boy. What do you think we did waiting for the waves to come up? Oh, anyway, John Lennon. John Lennon, this is pretty a testimony to what a fantastic movie it was, if it's worth anything. It was a very creative, fantastic man. If you just read the words to his song Imagine, and look at it, isolated. it's right up there with Gentle on My Mind. I mean, there's certain songs that you never forget. Well, I remember John Lennon at Leicester Square bought 2 tickets to every performance, and it stayed on hard ticket for almost 1 year, meaning when you went in, you had a prescribed seat. And he gave 2 tickets away to every performance for 1 year through his office. That's how much he thought that everybody should see that film. Now, I've been around the industry. I'm retired. I haven't worked in years, but I have to tell you, I've never ever heard a story about any other movie having that. Have you? I haven't. Not by from somebody like that.
No. So why don't we? I know you guys have like probably 1 million questions. We'll get to a few thousand of them. And Mr. Don right there has the roving mic. If you guys want to just raise a hand and he'll come to you.
By the way, this is always the best part of what we do, because sometimes the questions we haven't heard. I mean, every once in a while you get a pretty unusual question. You remember? Yeah.
Okay.
What?
He said just get a, if you want to do questions, line up. Where do you need them done? Right here. Just behind Don.
Line up right here.
Here is.
If you need him to come to you, he'll do it. And I can say that because I'm sitting down.
Hi, and again, I'm thrilled to see you guys here. Thank you again for coming.
A pleasure.
Question for Gary and a question for Keir. For Gary, can you talk about what it was like being suspended 30 feet in the air on the centrifuge, waiting for Keir to walk around to you, harnessed in place, and how many takes did Kubrick do for that?
Well, to open up, it was 65 feet. And it's kind of a nice question, only because in the shot, Keir is in the middle. He's
In the
up
hub.
a big level, in the hub. And then he climbs down, and I'm hanging upstairs, but I'm with a camera. And this is a very difficult shot to get, only because on the first shot, here's what happened. I get harnessed in, and I'm trying to be cool, because we're astronauts. And so they take me upside down, and I'm sitting up there. I'm hanging up there upside down, but I'm harnessed very securely to a seat. And there's 3 plates of gobbledygook, like yours. And there's red, green, and yellow, the primary colors, I think, red, blue, and green. And Stanley was a very cool guy. He was a very low-key guy, and he said, "All right, Lockwood on action, begin eating." And so, okay. Action. So I take this fork and I stick it in the green or the red, I don't remember which, and I go like this. And I see, as I disturb the wah of the dish, the whole thing starts to peel out and go right past my nose, 60 feet, and talk about a pristine set. There was the most pristine set on the planet. And that thing crashed down there, and it was the most incredible Rorschach test you've ever seen. And I looked down, I looked like this, and I went, well, that was the end of that whole day. If you recall, did we get to go
Well, they had to clean it up, but when the shot was finally done, I came down the ladder. You see Gary apparently casually eating upside down. You couldn't see the harness and all that was going on. And the shot, we were both in the same shot. And what it looked like is Gary is up here and I'm down here, and it looked like after I got my food that I walked upside down to him and slid in next to him to eat my food. How that was done was, that set was a giant, if you can imagine, the inside edge of...
it was made by Vickers Aircraft.
Yeah, in the carnival they have those things. What do they call them?
Ferris wheel. It was
Ferris
two
wheel,
halves.
yeah, it was like a Ferris wheel inside the inside edge. So what they did, I just stood in place and moved my feet. They revolved him down to me, but it looked like I was walking upside down to him.
Keep in mind that the camera is next to me, and the camera's subjective. And so it looks like Keir walks up to me when you
Yeah.
project.
And how many takes was that?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember, because Kubrick is notorious for taking 20, 30 takes. Did he do multiple takes on that scene?
No.
Stanley one day said to me, "You don't like to do a lot of takes, do you?" And I said, "Not particularly, but I mean, you're paying the bills and the per diem."
No, I don't remember on that particular shot that there were that many takes.
No, there
It took so, Stanley was so, he was incredible, but he was so prepared. We had more waiting time than any film I'd ever been on in between shots. Sometimes it would be half a day. You'd wait for the next shot to be set up. So we probably only did one or two of that particular one. It was so well orchestrated by the time we had to do
Two or
it.
3 shots a day.
Yeah.
And my question for Keir is regarding 2010, that I heard a story once that Peter Hyams, the director, when he saw a photo of you or when you showed up, said, "This guy hasn't aged a day since 2001.
Well, that's true. Actually, I was in L.A. doing a Macmillan and Wife or something, I can't remember, but I was doing a guest shot in a TV series, and I saw in the Hollywood Reporter that they were making this film called 2010. And I just figured this is 18 years later, they probably wouldn't be thinking that I could play that part in so much that I had to look the same. So I called MGM, explained to the receptionist who I was. She put me through to Peter Hyams and said, "Peter, I think you and I should at least meet before you make a decision on this role." So I met him at the commissary, and that was toward the end of the day, and the next morning I had a firm offer to do the role. And you're exactly right. It had to do with that he didn't feel that I had aged in the 18 years, at least not sufficiently, that it was going to make a difference.
Have you also told everyone here you're going to be live to be as old as that character at the end? This guy, you sit in a restaurant with him and he goes, "That's the non-gluten, I got to tell you, he'll live forever."
Hi, young man.
My question is for both of you. If either of you were approached to do the third and fourth sequel, because there were 2 more books after 2010 was published, would you accept if they made films?
Go ahead, you answer. I didn't quite hear that.
Oh, he said there's if you guys were approached to do the sequels to 2001 and 2010, would you be up for it?
Well, I can't believe that they, at this point, would cast me for these roles, but, sometimes they will cast someone from a past hit like this many years later playing a different role. If it was a good script and if it was a director that I admired and thought something of, I might, yeah.
I'm
Why not?
78 years old. I think the answer is in the pudding.
Well, the character you portrayed is the main character in the fourth book, so. Since you've been
I'm sorry,
floating
young
around-
man. What'd you say? Was that a good answer?
The character in the fourth book, and if they ever make it movie, is the character that you played.
You mean where they find Frank Poole once again?
1,000 years later,
Oh,
he's
yeah,
still alive.
yeah.
So,
So you're
Yeah.
good. Yeah, you're in it.
I like your hat.
I was wondering if you could both sort of discuss the preparatory process for shooting a film like this, both one knowing Kubrick's meticulousness, but also in a script that's this sort of ambiguous and odd. Like, how do you mentally prepare both as an actor and when you're thinking about the film itself and working through it?
Good.
Well, candidly, I think you're being a little esoteric and a person who's read too much film and filming.
I'm a soon to be a PhD in film study, so
Well,
feel free. I
trust me.
wear that. Right?
Trust me. After 25 years of traveling around the entire world doing interviews on 2001, I have hooked up with a lot of people like yourself. Not to say you're not important or you're not good, but there's a lot of theory and a lot of intellectualism that you teach. And the thing about 2001, you have to remember, it's just still a movie. It's just a grassroots movie. And what makes the picture so astonishingly different are these incredible sets and the eeriness and the music and everything. But as far as, and I can't speak for Keir because we're all motivated by different things, I can tell you candidly in my career, I was motivated by fast cars, money, and beautiful chicks.
I totally understand that whole process. Yeah, absolutely.
But I met Lee Strasberg. My first question was, did you read all those books? Because when he met me, he had a wall of books in back of him, and I thought, candid, classic case of insecurity, you know. I met Kubrick, just to show you how cool that guy was. My agency, I was a real wild kid. You don't know that. And my agent, you know, I was a wild character. And my agent thought that maybe Stanley should know me on a personal basis before I arrived for the film because I was maybe misunderstood. I was not misunderstood. So he sets up a meeting and I fly from LA to New York and I meet Stanley at the Oak Bar at the Plaza Hotel. You've been there before? And when I walk in, I had been a giant fan of Stanley Kubrick. I mean, even though I'm a redneck kid and I grew up in the country, when I saw his first movie, The Killing, I was also a painter as a kid and kind of smart in school. And I remember watching that movie and going, what's going on here? So it was the first time I ever walked out of a movie, walked over in the lobby car and looked to see who made that movie. I never had done that. And I walked over and saw Stanley Kubrick. Interesting, okay. Because when you see, if you're an artist, I mean a painter, and I did win a national high school contest for my painting for all of America. I was pretty good. I mean, I'm not saying I was the best, but I was good enough to win that. And it's all about clarity and perspective and, you know, if I walk through a museum and my wife also likes art and we come out and we say, okay, what was your favorite painting in there? Oftentimes will be the same. And I remember one day I said to Stanley, or Stanley said to me, he said, remember those little cameras, the Olympus Pen D2s? He gave one to his daughter Vivian and he sent her off to school. And he told her to photograph everything that she found attractive. And she came back and Stanley had those things developed and he showed them to me. And it would be coats hanging in a mud room or, you know, just things in her school. And I think as people, we all have the same attraction toward those things. And if you see a real beautiful, slick, fantastically designed car go around the corner, you will, oh, what was that? So I think that we behave in sort of a like manner. And what I'm trying to say to you is that after you walked out of 2001, you didn't exactly know what you had seen.
Right.
And you saw a lot of
still
new
don't know what I've
imagery.
seen.
You saw a lot of imagery that you'd never seen in the movie house in your life. So it kind of set the critics awry. And what I'm trying to say is that, but our job as actors is, if you're doing a low-budget movie, an expensive movie, a television show, or whatever, he'll verify our application and how we go about playing a character is the same. You don't play any character because you're doing a low-budget picture any differently than you do if you're working with Kubrick. Do you know what I mean? Isn't that correct?
Yeah, of course, Stanley, the only difference is between one film and another, or one TV show and another, is the atmosphere created. And if a director creates a relaxed atmosphere where you're not afraid to take a risk, you know, only you find exciting moments in performances if the actors are relaxed enough they're willing to be stupid. Because if they're watching their ass and because as an uptight director, you don't do the same kind of good work that you do having just come off with a terribly difficult director, Otto Preminger, who was a martinet. If you saw Stalag 17, He was typecasting because he played the German commandant of the concentration camp. And so going from Preminger to Kubrick was like night and day, and so we were able to do our job. But Gary's absolutely right. How do you play a cowboy? You put on a cowboy suit. How do you play an astronaut? You put on an astronaut suit. You know, the thing is that it's the interpersonal relationship with the actor that you're working with, working moment to moment, given the circumstances that the script gives you. It's nothing you come up with, and you try to fulfill it because you've been a trained actor. And that's essentially it.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for your performance.
And listen, are you looking to be a director one day?
No, I'm a purely academic. I teach Kubrick. So.
Oh, okay.
Good luck to you.
Yeah.
That leads into my question, which was that the year after the movie came out, James Blish wrote a review of both the novel Clark wrote and the movie, and he mentioned in passing that he had heard 7 different interpretations of the end of the movie, each of which he says was internally consistent, and each one was completely different from the other 6. And he said Clark's novel was one of them, but he didn't mention what the other 6 were. And I wrote him one time and asked him, but he didn't answer the question. And after he died in '75, I've wondered ever since then, what were the other 6? And I've never heard anyone come up with any.
Well, I don't know what those 6 were, but I can tell you in terms of, you're right. I think everybody has a slightly different experience when they watch 2001. I remember when this film came out, there was this nun who said it was one of the most religious experiences that she'd ever had, but there were atheists that got an equivalent kind of response. Not that it was a religious experience, but that they found it a very profound experience. The thing about great works of art, if you go to the Louvre and look at the Mona Lisa, the painter isn't around to answer any questions. What is that smile? Is it a smile? Is it a sarcastic smile? Is it a sexy smile? What kind of a smile, if it is a smile, is it? The only answer to that question is what, as you go past that painting, what is your gut response? What does it do to you? What do you think that smile is? And you want to know what? That response, because it's a great piece of work, is just as valid as my response. And that's the true same thing with something like 2001. There's so many interpretations you come up with, and because of Stanley's genius, any one of those could be valid.
Yeah, I got to meet Werner von Braun the summer the movie came out and asked him what he thought of the movie. And he got this puzzled expression on his face and said, well, I liked the movie up until the time the astronauts reached Jupiter, and I don't know what happened after that.
Hey, I can tell you a funny story about, I have a cameraman friend. He lives down in the desert in California near Palm Springs, and he's a Texan, and he's a very bright fella, and he's from West Texas. And the word got around that there was this movie out that was tripping everybody out. And so they could either go all the way east to Houston, which is about, 800, 900 miles from El Paso, or they could go up to Denver. Well, they chose Denver because, it's nicer scenery and trees. And so he said, quote, and we were shooting something up over the Bay Bridge, where the Bay Bridge was down below us. We were on top of a mountain. And here's the gateway to the Pacific Ocean, and there's the bridge, and we're sitting up there. We get ready to shoot, and the company's working, and camera guy walks over and he says, Gary, did I ever tell you about the time I saw 2001? I said, no. He said, well, and that's the setup. I was in El Paso, Texas. We chose to go to Denver. He said, we got in a pickup truck. A couple guys gave us some LSD. And he said, we heard that around the country, different people were dropping LSD and going in to see 2001. So we thought, just a couple of Texas cowboys, we could do the same thing. So we drove up to Denver, and he said, we got up there, and we got there around 1 o'clock or something, and he said, we didn't know anything about this LSD. The guy just told us to put it in there and drink some water with it, and all like that. And he said, so we took it, and we went in there, and we sat back, and And, then this music played for a while, and then a bunch of monkeys came on the screen. And he said, and the next thing I know, there's a little flash of light up here, and then a bit later, like that, a couple explosions going on. And the next thing I was in Africa. And he said, I sat there like this. He said, a complete daze. He said, I was in Africa, then I was in space. And he said, I had no idea what the hell happened to me. And then the lights came on, and it was beginning to be big lines. And he said, they ushered us out the lower half of the theater. And he said, and then there were people getting ready to come back in. And he said, I got outside with my cowboy friend, and I said, do you have any idea what it was we just saw? He says, I haven't the foggiest idea. He said, the whole thing. So he said, Gary, we saw it 2 more times that day. So that's a wonderful thing about us. Trust me, we both are smart enough as human beings to know we're very lucky that Kubrick settled on it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Hello. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm sorry to say that all the questions I had to say were asked by other people before me,
Great.
so I'm kind of dumbfounded of what question to ask, other than the fact that back when 2001 was originally aired, I was this little 10-year-old kid, and I told my dad I want to go see 2001 because back then there was this big chain called Howard Johnson's that had pushed the movie and shown about all this futuristic stuff, and so my dad finally and my mom finally hauled me off to Hollywood to see it, and my gut reaction to it, particularly towards the end, was, oh. I mean, I was like, ugh. And I was like, and Dad goes up to me and says, David, do you want to be an astronaut? Because my name is David Glenn, and my last name is kind of kindred to a sort of an astronaut that was very popular at the time. And I said, no, I want to do that. I want to do that, Dad. And I became a computer scientist and computer graphic engineer. And that's what I've been doing, trying to spend my whole life trying to make stuff like that. And thank you very much for creating a wonderful film.
I'd like to tell you this. We on occasion have people like you come to our table, and sometimes you're a computer scientist, correct? The first computer scientist I ever knew was my cousin.
And the term is graphic engineer, by the way.
But it's a little bit of a connection here, and that is that when certain people saw 2001, some of them were maybe in med school or, in the English department. Like I was a football player at UCLA, was also in the English department. But the point that English majors, yeah. You never make any money with it, but you're smarter than everybody after you leave school. Anyway, about various things, Anyway, the point is, we have people come up to us and say, you know something, I saw your movie, and I dropped out of med school, or I dropped out of this, and I went to computer science.
Yes.
So mazel tov.
Well, the other thing that happened to me, I get teased quite a bit is, since my first name is Dave, or David, I get occasionally, when something goes, it's like, somebody will come up and say, sorry, Dave, I cannot do that.
Have you ever had it say, Dave's not here?
Hi, I was curious, what, in your words, would be Stanley Kubrick's general approach to working with actors? And do you have any stories about him that aren't told very often, like reminiscences or stories about Kubrick on set or off set?
You're talking about on our film or other films also?
Other films as well. I mean, either one.
Only thing I remember, Stanley never raised his voice. He was always calm, always quiet. You had the feeling he was open. If you had an idea, you could try anything. Didn't mean he would use it. He was so prepared. He was so ultra prepared that he could relax. He was going to edit it later, so anything he didn't like, but you could you never felt there was you had to be careful with him. And, there wasn't any, the only thing I remember specifically is that when I first arrived, I felt I was a little tense, not because of his personality, but I was in such awe of him. So for the worst week, I remember he had a private conversation with me, say, Keir, you are a wonderful actor. I am so lucky to have you. His reason for doing it was to try to put me at ease because he kind of sensed that I was in awe of him, which I was. And once I got over that and realizing that I was just dealing with a genius, but a nice genius, it was fine.
He said, Lockwood, I'm happy to have you also, and you're $1 million less than Paul Newman. I made that up.
Hello. Gary, I met you about 20 years ago here in Atlanta, so I'm glad to see you again. I'm glad I finally met Keir in this life, so that's a milestone for me. I first saw 2001 in '68 when I was 11. After watching 2 years of Star Trek, it fried my remaining brain cells, and I've never been the same since.
I have to tell you, it was a tough job because I did the whole thing blind.
Yeah, I'm a 2001 freak. It's my favorite movie, and I try to collect just about whatever I can about it. And I just had two questions, kind of technical about it. One, I've seen reproductions of the 2001 suits, and people wear these water filtration things that they use to keep cool. Were they hot and uncomfortable when you wore them? And what was it like when you had to fit into the EVA pod to get away from Hal?
Well, I can tell you this. One day Stanley sent me down to another set next door, and they had the pods. They had already been made. And he said, would you be kind enough to go put on your spacesuit and see, because I have been a cowboy stuntman before I was an actor. I was an athlete, in several sports, and he knew that I was handy doing things, and so he said, see if you can find a comfortable way to walk into the pod so it doesn't look like, it's a malfunctioning device. And so I went down there and I figured it out, and I went back to him and I said, yeah, it's a piece of cake. And he said, what did you do? And I said, when we're in the spacesuit, it would be hard because of just the awkwardness of it. So I had him build a handle. I asked him if they could put a handle just underneath it where you'd never see it. And then, if you recall, we reached up and we walked ourselves in with our feet, you see our lower body, and then just slid into the couch. And it had a little something that him sending me down there, I'll just tell you, had a little something to do with the intermission break. Because one day we were shooting and Arthur and Stanley had been turning up the pressure of the paranoia on the computer, and they were shooting different things that were, I don't know, I felt not quite up to our standard. And one day we were shooting in front of, we have mission control, you and I. And Stanley was over there, and Keir was here, and I was here. And I remember Stanley looked over at me and he said, you don't seem that normally enthusiastic about things today. And I kind of made an insulting comment, about what we were doing. I had never been antagonistic toward him because he was so cool, and I mean, we both knew we were in the hands of the best there was. And so you don't take it upon yourself to be like that. And I said something sort of offhand. So we go up to our room, and we stayed pretty fit. And well, he's always fit. He pisses me off. Over here was Keir's room, Stanley, and mine. So Cracknell knocks on my door. Hello? The Gov wants to see you, mate. Am I fired? Don't know. Because he fired people on rare occasion. So I go down and I go in his room, and he has a whole wall of 78 records, the old. And he looks at me and he says, Lockwood, you're Polish, right? I go, yeah, Polish and German. He says, so he reaches up and pulls down a little Chopin. And I said, look, before we get into it, am I fired? He said, no, I'm not firing you. He said, but I'll tell you something. He said, you know, someone like you who's been a real fine, cooperative person, when a person like you got upset with what we were doing, I'm just curious, what is it? And I said, well, I know that you guys are trying to turn up the paranoia on the part of the computer as regards us, you know, to create xenophobia and et cetera, but I honestly believe that there's, you know, I don't know, I just think that there's maybe a better way to go or something. So he said, yeah, well, on the way back to London, there was a Jewish section where they had delis. And he knew that sometimes I'd have my driver go into Golders Green and get bagels and lox. I like that kind of food. I'm a cowboy. I grew up on a ranch, but I like that kind of food. And so he said, I'm going to have my driver, Eddie, take you back today. And he said, and I'm going to give Eddie some money, and he'll go in there and get whatever you want, you know, and deli food. He said, and the next time I hear from you, let's see what you come up with. So I go back to my flat and I go, God, that's kind of a weird thing. Okay. So I get out a spiral notebook. And when I remember when I won the national poster contest, I thought about it a long time. And so I feel that if you bracket your mental exposures by writing things down, that you have an understanding, a slow burning in the subconscious of what it is you're thinking and what's your problem. And so you have to identify the problem before you can really find a solution. And I'm just playing along there, and I get not an epiphany, but I get sort of as a famous man once said to me, the missing link came in. And I go, oh my God. So I call him up, and it's about 9:30 at night, and I said something to him. And when we went in the next day, we started doing all those improvs. And we did all these improvs, Keir and I and everything. And the whole idea was to go into the into the small capsule. And it was my idea that if we went in there, we could isolate ourselves from the computer, you see, and therefore he wouldn't know.
This is the scene when Hal reads our lips.
Yeah. So what happened was Keir and I, by going in there and being very free to discuss exactly the problem, two things could be accomplished. One, we would inform you, the audience, as to what the condition of it was, and also the computer would learn. And there was a fella there that the next day when he had seen what had come out of our conversation. His name was, I think, Victor Linden. Mm-hmm. And Victor Linden said, well, you know, our biggest problem is we can shoot the scene, but we have to figure out how Hal's going to find out. And this fellow, Victor Linden, said, well, he can read your lips. And that was it. So when Stanley finally finished, I'm almost done. When finally finished, if you watch the film again, notice the actual steps that take place. We get in the pod, and I think your line is, what do you think, is that?
Yeah, something like that.
And before we speak, don't you turn and release Keir turns. No, we say rotate the pod. And we rotate the pod. But the irony is we rotate the pod around to Hal. Originally, the window that would look at us was not facing Hal.
That's right.
Yeah. So we rotate, he yells rotate the pod, and I yell rotate the pod or something. And then it goes around and stops, and then Keir turns and throws all the switches and says rotate the pod, and then nothing happens. And I think maybe I say, yeah, rotate the pod, Hal. And he doesn't do it. And then Keir says, what do you think?
Yeah.
And we start the longest scene of the movie. Well, that's how it became the intermission break.
Well, what I really want to know was it cramped and uncomfortable and difficult to sit in the pod with two people?
That was the most takes we did together, 35. And I never could understand, candidly, the difference between take 7 and take 35. Did you ever figure out? I just thought he was trying to tire us out.
Hello.
Hello.
First, I want to say, thank you for being a part of that movie and also being represented in Lego form in a number of my shoebox dioramas when I was a kid. You guys were really awesome in those. But yeah, I wanted to ask, hearing you talk about the process of making the film, everybody seems so calm and relaxed and like it was just a lot of fun. Was there any inkling during that time that you guys were making something that would be, a huge cultural phenomenon that would be represented in media, like hundreds of other pieces of media for decades and decades and taught in classes and, because watching it later.
I definitely thought we were making what we'd made. I do. And I was criticized by the press for saying that.
Yeah,
I remember before the picture came out, I said to the press, I think we made one of the greatest films ever. And the press said, Gary Lockwood came in today looking like a hip Beverly Hills accountant in a three-piece suit with long hair and saying that he thinks they've made one of the greatest movies ever. Wow. That's the kind of jetsam we faced in the beginning. But time, we won in time. Look, we're here. You're all here.
So I'm optimistic that I'll get to see the film on 70 millimeter someday because of the revival with The Master a few years ago and Quentin Tarantino's new movie that's being distributed on 70 millimeter. But I wanted to know whether you had any opinions on the format and whether it's much better at the larger format and whether you would like to see more movies shot with a 70 millimeter camera.
You want to answer that? You're more technical than I am.
Well, yes, very much so. I don't watch movies on my iPhone or my iPad. We're all a little older in here and looking at you, it's not, I don't have anything, against kids sitting there texting each other in the backseat of the car so their father won't hear. I understand that. But, when a young guy tells me, I saw 2001 on my iPad last week. I honestly look at him, because I grew up way out in the country. Now, this guy grew up in the city with an intellectual family. I grew out in the country in a ranch, but I got to tell you, movies were it for me. I was a prolific reader as a kid, and I would ride my horse all the way into town, and I could pay 8 cents, and they'd take care of him in a corral, and I'd go see movies. And I've always loved movies. And I always will love movies. And even today, I live in Malibu, and I drive way over the hill, the mountains, the coastal mountain range, to go to Cineopolis. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a new movie company from Mexico called Cineopolis. And you get in there and push a button, and it makes it into a bed. And then you can have a cappuccino, or you can order a spaghetti and meatball. I don't know. The point that I'm trying to make is that the big screen, 70 millimeter with all the sound is fantastic. Now, if this new generation has decided it's all in here, fine, but they're missing a hell of a wonderful experience.
Well, when you figure that Stanley's intent was it to be shown on those huge screens of the day, and you're missing his intent. Unfortunately, if you see it on the small screen, there are things that don't impact you the way they can. Some things, if you're looking at a small film, black and white film that's It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter so much. You can watch it on your television set in Turner Classic Movies. It's great. But if any film was meant to be shown on a large screen, it was 2001, I think.
Let's get this guy's last question, and then you can find these guys on the Walk of Fame, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Right, absolutely.
Thank you both so very much for being here. This is a wonderful experience, and thank you, Joe, and everybody for bringing them here. You can consider this a serious question or a not so serious question, but do you think that extraterrestrials may have delayed contacting us because they are so bewildered by 2000?
That's a great question. I like that. I don't know if that needs a response because you've just said it all, you know. I will say this, however, that Arthur C. Clarke was there, especially for the early part of the shooting of the film. He wasn't always there, but we got to meet him. We had the honor and the pleasure of meeting that wonderful man. And I do remember there were discussions about aliens, extraterrestrials, and his point was, other people have made this point, but I remember perhaps it was the first time I had heard this point made. And he said, if you figure there are billions of galaxies, each one of those galaxies has billions of stars, solar systems. Multiply that by the 7 or 8 or 9 or 9 planets going around each of those stars. You can't even conceive of such a number in your head. Even if only 0.00000000001 had intelligent life, there's a lot of intelligent life out there.
It's like that Cole Porter song. On that you can rely.